trades, and then who has the best, biggest stuff left over, and that's more often than not going to be the Abzan control deck.
All right, so Costa on the left, he's 6-0-1. He's against Jake Mondello. Jake has 1 loss on the day, so we are underway. Costa starts out on Caves of Koilos, and it's a temple for Mondello. Pressure will be on Costa to have a 2-drop frequently in this matchup, as the universal removal from Abzan tends to cost 3.
Yeah, you need to get out in front, very important. Now, the more that your deck can hang around later on in the game, the less and less that's true. But certainly game 1, there's a lot of pressure on Costa to come out of the gate swinging with a 2-drop.
Yeah, now that Hangerback Walker's in the deck, Costa not on any Death Dealers. It is just 4 Fleece Mains and 4 Hangerbacks in the list. He does have a land on turn 2. We'll see which one he starts out on.
And that's, to me, the biggest upside of Hangerback Walker appearing in this deck is just get to clean up the mana base. When you're trying to cast Fleece Main Line, Bioblight, Rakshasa, Death Dealer, Anafenza, you have some basic lands in the deck. It's very easy just to get not functional draws. Hangerback Walker and Fleece Main Lion means you can bias the mana base a lot more towards green and white, de-emphasize black, become more of a 2.5 color deck, which is a much better position for an aggressive deck to be in.
Yeah, it's turn 2 Fleece Main for Costa. There were frequent draws where you'd have that basic Plains on Rakshasa Death Dealer at the same time that were really awkward for Abzan aggro. And we'll see if Jake has a turn 2 answer. He does not, nothing like Bioblight. So this is where Abzan aggro can steal some of its game 1 wins as Costa swings in for 3, is that he's ahead 1 creature, and if he continues to play his own threats paired with Mondello's removal, Costa will remain 1 creature ahead.
Yes.
And so far he's going to do just that. Hangerback Walker is the play. 3rd land from Mondello. He does have a Siege Rhino, Courser of Krufix. Looks like a slew of removal spells. This is what the Abzan control does.
Though this is not necessarily that bad of a spot for Costa. If Jake's not in a position to cast multiple spells a turn and Matt can keep producing threats, then, you know, he gets into his points of damage along the way and might be able to close the game out. It's really important for Jake to be able to hit his land drops. So you see right now, I think he has no more lands in hand. And you know, if he misses with these Courser Krufix when he finally decides to play them, he might not be able to get the Siege Rhino, or Matt's initial efficiency and advantage early on in the game might be too much for Jake to overcome.
Yeah, so Jake's going to go for Courser here, and this is a line that I've always found to be a little touchy. Oftentimes, because if Jake loses this Courser, he doesn't get the free land off it, and there is some pressure on him to just start playing removal spells every turn and just kind of hoping to hit that land drop at some point.
Yeah, typically I am a fan of saying, I'm going to go ahead and play a removal spell on turn 3, turn 4 cast my Courser, give myself a shot into the land. Maybe if Jake draws a land, instead he plays a land, another removal spell. But to play a Courser in that spot is very risky, because any removal spell from Costa is going to set you really far behind, especially Dramoka's Command, where he's killing your creature and getting some value left over.
Right, so if he played the removal spell, then his next turn could be Temple, another kill spell, and then he'd have a Siege Rhino online.
Exactly.
So as it is, Matt's going to go ahead and put a counter on his Hangerback and have Jake sacrifice a creature. This is the best of both worlds. He still gets the Courser off the table, and at the same time gets to have a counter on that Hangerback Walker.
Yep, and you might wonder why Costa hit for 2 there rather than put a counter on the Hangerback Walker. This keeps it out of Abzan charm range. So this way, if Jake wants to use a removal spell in the Fleece Main Line, that's fine. Your Hangerback Walker is still around. It's a good threat to have left over. If Jake has a Languish, well, that's great. You have a couple Thopters left over in that case. So Matt doing a very good job of splitting the difference here of trying to make his threats the right size and shape to play around Jake's removal.
All right, so Costa got the hit in last turn. He's going for 5 damage again this turn. If Jake takes it, he'll be at 6. That seems really low. Well, Jake is looking at removal spells, but his mana base is not cooperative. It's a lot of pain lands. And so he actually takes the damage, goes to 6, and Costa pulls farther ahead with a draw 2 on Abzan Charm.
And I think Matt has probably sniffed out the most likely sequence here, which is a removal spell on Hangerback Walker into Languish. Jake just passing there on the 3rd turn and not doing anything indicates that's the most likely sequence, and I think Matt sniffing that out is just going to draw some cards there.
Matt does not even bother to get out tokens for his Hangerback Walker, and Jake makes exactly the line you mentioned. Did not have to pay any life there thanks to Matt's Urborg, by the way.
Yep. Really important. Every point's going to matter here, with Jake trying to stabilize this game at a pretty low health total.
So right now, Jake is in, despite being at low life total, is in a good position. He's kept the board clean. Now the danger is that 2 Siege Rhinos from Matt spells doom.
Not only that, but another problem is Jake is still not getting in a position to resolve 2 spells in 1 turn. Following up with your own Siege Rhino here is just fine, but then you're opened up to any removal spell, Dramoka's Command, and so on. So he either needs Matt to stop playing stuff, or Jake needs to be able to make enough land drops and get to a spot where he's playing a kill spell and a creature in the same turn. That's how he starts to overtake this game.
Yeah, 1 Siege Rhino from Matt drops Mondello down to 3. Mondello with a pair of rhinos of his own. See if he looks like he's going to try to rhino back, and that will be the play. He will gain 3, but he had to take 1 to cast it, so he's at 5. And for Costa, that was the danger. Here's Dramoka's command, and game 1 will go to Matt Costa.
Yep, and that's exactly the recipe that Abzan Aggro needs to win game 1. Get off to a good start on the play, have the opponent do nothing on the second turn of the game, and then have your removal spells line up the right way against their plays.
Yeah, Jake's plan is to stay alive until the point where he can either cast 2 spells or cast an Elspeth. It's really trade his way to 6 mana.
Yep.
But game 1 to Matt Costa, and that's a steal. That's for the Abzan Aggro deck as we go to sideboard.
Yep, and on Jake's side here, 2 copies of Dramoka's Command, of Glare of Heresy, a Surge of Righteousness, a Russian Cleric, a Bile-Blight, an Ultimate Price, 2 copies of Duress, a Drown in Sorrow, a Sorin, an Utter End, a Tragic Arrogance, an Ugin, and an Unravel the Aether. I think that Jake's going to want to really load up on removal spells here. I think even something a little bit more expensive like Utter End can come in, especially because Matt has Hangerback Walker. I think Bile-Blight's great in this matchup. The copy of Glare of Heresy as well. It's possible if he thinks he can defend himself long enough that Ugin becomes an option for his top end. But now that he's playing against Hangerback Walker, Ugin probably gets a lot worse.
Yeah, on Matt Costa's side, he does have, all right, well, we'll go through it. He has 2 Ultimate Price of Glare of Heresy, a Self-Inflicted Wound, 2 Arishan Clerics, 2 Duresses, 2 Thought Seizes, another Dramoka's Command, an Elspeth of his own, an additional Herald of Torment, and 2 Tragic Arrogance. A lot of these seem to let him morph into the control role in matchups, but this is a matchup where I don't believe he wants to be doing that.
Well, I think he wants to still have a little bit of his top end available. You know, I agree with you that he wants to still be a beatdown deck, but you can bring in a couple cards like Elspeth, so if the game goes beyond turn 5 or 6, things are not completely hopeless. I think Costa's going to take that kind of approach. I think the discard spells are not great for this matchup. He might bring it in. I'm really interested in things like Glare of Heresy and Self-Inflicted Wound. There are cards that allow him to respond to Jake, but still, because of mana efficiency, because of the damage they deal, allow him to still keep an aggressive posture in the matchup.
Yeah, when you have a card like Glare of Heresy, it allows you to say, Glare a Siege Rhino and make an additional 2-drop on the same turn.
Yeah, and especially when you have Hangerback Walker on the list that you may want to be activating from time to time, every little bit of mana efficiency adds up.
All right, well, while they're getting ready for game 2, we're going to talk a little bit about Star City Game Night. This is the pins that we wear during the commentary. In the week of August, that pin is the monkey. It is available on both tokens and pins, which you can find at your local store. Just find out which stores are running StarCityGames.com Game Night. It'll be in whatever format the store decides to play, and these pins and tokens are given as prizes.
Yep, and you see the August kit obviously running out of time. We're going to be in September very soon. We got that kit ready for you. It's the Kraken. If you're a store looking to get signed up for Game Night, too late to get signed up for September, but if you want to get signed up for October, which is the Hippo, head over to StarCityGames.com/Game Night for more information, or contact your Star City Games organized play representative.
All right, so Mondello will need both of the sideboard games here. And it does seem like the matchup is favorable for Jake game 1. I don't think it changes too much post-board. It's still good for Abzan control, but winnable from both sides.
It's weird. Both decks kind of morph into versions of each other. Jake needs to become a faster deck. He needs to be able to respond early on in the game. 2-mana removal spells are at a premium. So he becomes a cheaper, faster deck, though still the control deck in the matchup. And Costa becomes a little bit slower to give himself some staying power in case Jake is able to blunt his early offense. Matt could go to things like Elspeth and still be able to hang around in the game.
Exactly. Jake will get to be on the play for this game, which can be so important in the matchup. Allows him to match up his 3-mana kill spells with Costa's 2-drops and not take damage for it. Last game we saw that those were matching up, but Jake was taking 3 damage every time it happened.
I've been watching Abzan Control now for nearly a year, and most of its losses feel like the same thing's happening. It doesn't do anything on turn 1, doesn't do anything on turn 2, and plays 1 spell a turn for too long, turns 3 and beyond. That's exactly what happened. Matt got an initial edge. Jake died with 5 spells in his hand. It's not like Jake stalled lands or had any troubles there. It was just he was a little slow out of the gates, and he was not able to take advantage of all the individually powerful cards in his hand.
Yeah.
Which is why I think things like, a single copy of Murderous Cut in the main deck, I don't believe Jake has one, but I really like 1 copy of Murderous Cut somewhere in the 75. and ideally somewhere in the 60,
Yeah.
because it just feels like,
Gives you the potential to play 2 spells.
yep, in a lot of spots, it's an interchangeable removal spell, just like anything else you could be playing. But the sequences where you get to go make a play and kill your 1 threat, or kill your 2 threats in 1 turn, then Abzan Control pulls ahead, and suddenly things like Den Protector and Elspeth are too much to overcome. But Jake could never get into that position in the first game because he just didn't do anything for the first 2 turns, and then just had a play a turn for the rest of the game.
Exactly. We did see this, Abzan Control was one of the big decks at the Pro Tour not too long ago. It's interesting how this goes in cycles between Abzan Control and aggro being popular. We definitely moved full circle back where Abzan aggro seems to be the deck to beat again.
Yep. People are still responding to Hangerback Walker. And Abzan aggro has incorporated that card to great effect. And it helps this match out a lot, especially when you see Matt play very savvy with it. Last game, not going to 3 power to avoid Abzan Charm.
All right, both players trade off some temples to start the game. Jake will pass back. Second turn for Costa. And first creature on the board will be Matt again. It's going to be Hangerback Walker this time. It's a lot more manageable for Jake. So he gets to make his way up to 3 lands. So he does have a copy of Nissa Vastwood Seer in his hand. That one, a 2 of in his deck.
Yep. And Abzan Control can be pretty liberal about taking mulligans because there's just so many 2-for-1s woven in the deck. And this is just another one.
Yeah, well, a lot of your hands just feel the same when you play the deck. You have some lands, and the power level of your cards is very flat. Whether your hand is Siege Rhinos and Heroes Downfalls or Coursers and Abzan Charms, it's kind of all the same thing.
Everything trades, everything blocks. It's a lot of the same stuff. The cards look very different, but they're all part of the strength of Abzan Control is just how interchangeable the cards feel.
There are no bad cards in the deck,
yep.
Certainly. So Nissa will be the play for Jake. Goes and gets a forest into his hand. And here's going back to Costa. And we'll see here. He goes ahead and pumps up Hangerback. And for Jake, looks like it's going to be an attack and land 4. And follow up as a face-down Den Protector. And this game going a lot more at Jake's pace. He's managing to keep his life total on par with Matt's. And remember, this is the strategy from the Abzan Control side is pretty simple here. It's trade and keep pace, and then eventually Elspeth.
Yep, and you might see something like a face-down Den Protector, and in this sort of spot where it's vulnerable to a removal spell, there's nothing good to get back and ask, well, why didn't Jake just do something else? Or isn't he worried about his Den Protector just getting killed? And the reality is, Jake's kind of fine with it. He's got to do something with his mana. He's just looking to exchange resources and then eventually pull ahead with better cards and more 2-for-1s.
Yeah, Matt gets some pressure on the board this time, though. It's a turn 4 Siege Rhino. That'll put the life totals solidly in his favor. 21 for Costa and 14 for Mondello. But Elspeth draws closer. Land number 5 for Jake. He has multiple Abzan Charms and looks like a Courser in hand. So plenty of ways to buy time as he builds up toward the Planeswalker.
A lot of trading to be done.
Here's Abzan Charm for Siege Rhino. Urborg in play on Matt's side, so he's able to use his basics to do that. And Den Protector will go ahead and grab back Abzan Charm, and Jake will attack for 5.
And Jake getting the best of both worlds right now. More pressure in play and winning the card advantage / long-term implications of the game sort of race.
Yeah, and that's the great part about Abzan Charm here is it's stopping Matt from being able to make his Hangerback Walker any bigger than a 2/2.
Yep. And in the event that Matt trades it off for something that Jake has Bile Blight ready to take care of the Thopters.
All right. Well, if he can't make it into a 3/3, Matt will send it into the red zone. Here comes Hangerback Walker. It'll attack Jake for 2 to drop Jake to 12. Costa with follow-ups has Fleecemane Lion, Anafenza the Foremost, Glare of Heresy, among others.
Yep. And you can see Costa took a pretty aggressive route last turn. Could have used Hero's Downfall on the face-down card instead of casting Siege Rhino. And now he's sort of got to keep up the pressure. The long game is not going to be good for him. Jake's got a lot of removal spells in his hand. So Matt's got to err on the side of aggression here.
All right, let's meet Fleecemane Lion. And then pays 3 for a face-down morph. That's a Den Protector on Matt's side. So it's not the most aggressive line. He opted for Den Protector there instead of the Anafenza in his hand.
Does set him up next turn for Downfall plus unmorphing the Den Protector, which is a nice sequence. He also may want to have Anafenza left over in the event that Jake feels like he has to pull the trigger on Language this turn.
Yeah. Jake may have to pull the trigger on something. If he lets Costa untap, there's the threat of Fleecemane Lion going monstrous.
And you also just have to, now the Den Protector is a real threat, because if Costa has a removal spell or a discard spell in his hand or something, that Den Protector is a huge threat.
We'll see if this is enough to get Jake to play Languish. It doesn't seem like it. I don't know if he wants to exactly to give Costa those 1/1 Thopters. Does have Bioblight in hand, though. Maybe that's good to use here.
This is a spot where Jake is jammed up a little bit, again, because of the mana issues of this deck. He's just not, I mean, this is the best thing that Jake can do with the turn, is just cast 2 spells.
Yeah, and I like this line a lot from Jake. Bioblight takes care of the Morph. Abzan Charm takes care of the Den Protector. He attacks, and so once again, he just repeats his 5 damage for Costa's 2, and you see Mondello has made the life totals swing back to being even again.
Yep. Now, this play takes Language off the table for a while because Jake is positioning himself as the aggressor, and he doesn't have a clean answer to Thopters after Hangerback Walker. All
right, so Anafenza, the foremost, is the play for Matt. His life totals are 11 and 10 in Costa's favor. Draw from Mondello looks like may have been an Ugin, which that's a ways off.
Well, Siege Rhino in hand alongside Abzan Charm, so he's got a pretty good setup here.
Yeah, he can just, if he cares to, he can just continue this aggressive plan. He can exile the Anafenza, attack for 5 more, continue to win the race. Abzan aggro, from a racing perspective, is pretty honest. There's not going to be damage coming out of nowhere to change the result.
Yeah, Siege Rhino, Abzan Charm, you know, occasionally you see Gather Courage floating around the list, but for the most part, what you see is what you get.
Abzan Charm will exile the Legend. Or will it? Costa may have a response. Possibly this would make Jake suspect something like Dramoka's command.
Well, it's possible he has a downfall here and just wants to make sure that whatever he targets with the downfall gets exiled instead of put in the graveyard.
That's the play, and Nitso will get exiled. Matt putting on the brakes here a bit on his own. His last card is Glare of Heresy, realizing this actually isn't going in his favor at the moment. He's losing the aggro race, which isn't really where he wants to be.
Yeah, and Matt has made some great efforts here to keep the Hangerback Walker at 2/2 to avoid Abzan Charm. Now with Jake having played several copies and needing to block this Den Protector, Matt might just hold back here, try to block, and if Jake doesn't offer up an attack, we'll sit back and pump for a little while.
Mm-hmm. He has gotten enough pressure to get Jake to do that, and he'll just go ahead and activate Hangerback Walker and pass. So why the main phase activation?
Well, he can't block anyway because the Den Protector is 3 power. He has to do this before blocks, and if Jake has something like Hero's Downfall, he doesn't want to have it get targeted in response. He wants as many Thopters as possible.
That's all right. Den Protector will swing in. Costa down to 5. But starting next turn, Matt will be able to now block with Hangerback Walker as it's big enough.
Yes. But you see with Abzan Charm and Siege Rhino, it looks like Jake's got it all covered, but we'll find out soon.
Here's another Rhino from Mondello. Costa down to 2 off the trigger. Draws a land. He'll scry at the bottom. He's got a Glare of Heresy for the Rhino. But if that's some Abzan Charm waiting in Mondello's hand, it looks like we'll head to a game 3. And it is. Charm takes care of the Walker. Den Protector attacks in, and on to the decider. So Mondello taking down game 2. It's a matchup which we like for him, but though that's not the way you'd expect him to win.
Yeah, it was a weird way for him to win, though Jake's deck is probably a little bit lower in the curve on the balance. But Abzan controls a very flexible deck, and Abzan aggro is going to take some points of damage off its lands in most games. And Costa's draw was a little bit on the slow side. He didn't start off with Fleecemane Lion. He started off with Hangerback Walker. Costa had a lot of removal that game. He had Den Protector. It wasn't the same aggressive curve we saw from him from game 1. And if Costa's going to let Jake just curve out and attack, well, that's something the Abzan control deck can do as well. It's not the primary game plan in the matchup, but it's not something the deck can't do.
And what it really just felt like to me here is that the decider is that Mondello's Den Protectors flipped up and got cards, whereas Costa's didn't. So at the end of the day, Mondello was just a couple cards up, and that was enough for the damage.
Yeah, that was the real swing in the game there. Was on the 4th turn when Jake put that Den Protector face down, or the 5th turn of the game, and Costa had an opportunity to either cast Hero's Downfall or Siege Rhino. You get a sense that in the event Jake is willing to risk the Den Protector there for no value, maybe his hand's really soft. But by Costa not downfalling right there and then Jake having a removal spell, it was too much to overcome. Jake had the advantage both in the damage race and with the resources, and Costa really lost on both fronts. Jake won the game having won the damage race with a lot of late game action still left over in his hand.
All right, so all these players get ready for Game 3. We're going to talk a little bit about the Season 3 championship. So going into this, it was Danny Jessup standing at the top with 225 points. Now, as we know, Danny Jessup has dropped. He's not going to day 2, so he is at 227 to end the season. So there are 4 players that can catch him, and they're the next 4 on the leaderboard. Chris Van Meter, Ross Merriam, Joe Lissette, and Logan Mize. And all of them are actually able to do so this weekend. So there's going to be some sweat for Danny. If we look at it, first of all, Chris Van Meter and Ross Merriam, they're going to need a top 8 to pass him. Whereas for Logan Mize and Joe Lissette, they would need to make the finals. So Merriam at 6-1, Mize at 6-1. Both those players are definitely able to pass him here.
Yeah, and in the case of Joe and Logan, keep in mind, it has to be a second place finish, because if they win the Invitational, they get an invite by winning the Invitational. So for Danny, the disaster states here, CVM or Ross in the top 8, or Joe or Logan losing in the finals.
Yeah, I see Joe here on 4-2-1. He would need a pretty big run to go ahead and make it in the top 8, but I think all eyes right now are on Ross Merriam. At 6-1, he is a real threat to overtake Danny Jessup.
For sure, and keep in mind, we have other tournaments that are going on this weekend. We have an Open Series event that'll start tomorrow. We've got the IQs on Sunday. All that applies for Season 4. See, this is the last tournament of Season 3, so there's no funkiness going on with, well, Danny can spike the Open, that's standard tomorrow, and get some points that way. What you see is it's on the table right now. So it is definitely in play for one of those players to jump Danny and take the Season 3 point invite.
So it'll be an interesting one to watch develop tomorrow. For CVM and Joe Lissette, they're both on win-ins to make day 2, so they'd need one heck of a run.
Yeah.
For Chris Van Meter, he did actually go 5-3, so he will be competing on day 2. A 8-0, 7-1 finish might put him in that top 8.
And we've seen some stress before. In the Seattle Invitational last year, it looked like Stephen Mann had it all locked up. Nothing could possibly go wrong, and got a really good sweat when Danny Jessup, of all people, was able to make the finals of that tournament.
All right, going on to Game 3, though. This is Matt Costa and Jake Mondello. Matt, one of the few undefeated players, is in 5th going into day 2, so it looks like we'll have 2 or 3 undefeated players at the end of day 1, depending on how this match goes.
And you saw Jake there with just an overwhelming resource advantage at the end of that second game. He mulliganed. The deck can accrue so many 2-for-1s. So it's still important for Matt to be the aggressor in the matchup, even though he can hang around a little bit longer in the game with cards like Elspeth and Sideboard and a couple other tools. When Jake is able to just make his land drop and cast his stuff, if they're going pound for pound with each other, Jake's going to win way more often than not.
Yeah, the cards and Obs on control are powerful enough that even on something like a 6-card hand, it's very reasonable for Jake to win a game.
And he had Languish and Ugin left over in his hand. It wasn't like he used all the spells. He still had plenty of stuff to cast.
Costa starting on a 6-card hand. Let's see if he can keep that for Game 3. And with that, we'll be underway. Costa starting out on a Temple. He does have a copy of Thoughtseize in hand. Pressure will be on him to make a efficient 2-drop, however. Fleecemane Lion was his 2-drop Game 1. Game 2 was Hangerback Walker. That seemed far more manageable for Jake.
A little bit slower.
Here's a Thoughtseize from Matt, and it's a control-heavy hand for Jake. He has lands 2, 3, and 4 to go with a Bioblade, a Nissa, a Siege Rhino, and a Tragic Arrogance.
And, this is just a very, very challenging hand to poke a hole in. Everything's good, and everything feels interchangeable.
Yeah, it's got a lot of cards that are great at trading. Nissa buys time, and then, of course, it has Siege Rhino, who's good on just about any board.
Yep. And it looks like with Den Protector in hand, Matt's going to go after the removal spell here, try to set up a sequence where he can Den Protector back to Thoughtseize and attack Jake's top end.
And Bioblade was selected. The draw for Jake, however, though, was another kill spell. It was a copy of Hero's Downfall. As Jake will continue playing Temples. And that's going to be an unfortunate draw from Matt. I think you're right that he wanted to play it. He wanted to get a game set up where he starts trading, but gains damage while doing it. If he goes to his turn 3 Den Protector and gets it Hero's downfalled, that'll be a disappointment. He goes for Fleecemane Lion instead.
Yeah, and you know, when you're looking at the Abzan deck being in one spell of territory for a long time, this is a spot where that's fine, because if he's casting one spell a turn, it's trading with Costa's entire board. Where Jake got in trouble in the first game was Matt got 2 threats in play. So when he's trading 1 for 1, he's taking damage the whole time.
Yeah, and Jake's going to go ahead and play a land and pass, and I like this. And this is something which he didn't do game 1. Oftentimes you get a spot with Abzan control in this matchup where you can play a creature turn 3 or a removal spell turn 3. And I frequently find that the removal spell is the way to go. You have time to cast your creatures later. I like that Mondello went for downfall over Nissa in this situation.
The higher that Jake's life total is, the more as the game progresses, he'll have the time to be able to deploy his top end. So there, even though Matt can't really burn out, like you mentioned, the aggro deck is not pumping out a lot of tricksy damage, the more life total he has, the more opportunities he has for favorable blocks, make land drops towards Ugin and Elspeth. Those are his game-winning lines.
Yeah, and you think, as long as the game goes on long enough for Jake to cast his whole hand, it's unlikely that he'll be behind once his cards are gone.
Yeah, and whenever Matt gives him some breathing space here, then he gets that turns of, all right, I'll cast this and make a land drop and say go. You accrue these little pieces of advantage, and that translates to a lot down the line when they allow you to cast your 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 mana spells.
All right, so the Fleecemane Lion will take a downfall. Jake stays at 19, and Matt's only play is to play Den Protector face down and play a 4th land tapped. Opens the door for Jake to play a Siege Rhino or a Nissa.
Well, the worst case scenario for Matt here is a removal spell, because then he really is leaning on this Den Protector. You already get the sense that Jake is about to have a large resource advantage. He needs this Den Protector to unmorph to be able to attack Jake's top hand and just have enough cards to work with.
Yeah, so Jake's play was Siege Rhino. So we go back to Costa. Self-inflicted wound will take care of the Rhino. Jake's back down to 20. And I like how Matt's played this because now he has enough mana to Den Protect back that self-inflicted wound.
Yeah, he has the question now of, do I just attack for 2 and say go and have some flexibility with what I get it back? Or do I know for sure I'm going to get back Thoughtseize, Self-Inflicted Wound, or Fleecemane Lion, and I get an extra point of damage in this turn by unmorphing ahead of time?
And that's what he's deciding. Looks like he'll go for the unmorph. Now Matt's taking some incidental damage here. See, he taps Mana Confluence again. You have to be aware of that.
I think that with the way this game is shaping up, I know Jake kind of won the second game via damage race. If Matt's life total starts to matter, it's because Jake's board is overwhelming. Matt has to be very aggressive, just getting enough resources to work with, casting his spells on time, and attacking the expensive card in Jake's hand.
Yeah, Matt decided to get back Thoughtseize instead of Self-Inflicted Wound. Hits Jake down to 17. Jake's play for the turn is his own Den Protector. He leaves up 2 mana. In the meantime, he's also drawn a Sorin.
Another card like Nissa, where if Matt gives him an opening, a little bit of breathing space, a card that can generate some 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s.
All right, back over to Jake. Matt does not want to trade his Den Protector for Jake's. Or perhaps he does. Looks like he'll actually just attack into it. Somewhat expected Jake to offer a trade there.
I think there's potentially a risk with Dramoka. I guess Dramoka's command is safe in that spot.
Jake will go to 14. Costa will Thoughtseize.
I think the thing is he can't trade now. He has to unmorph ahead of schedule, and he doesn't know what he wants to get back yet. Depending on what Matt does, he may want Downfall, he may want Bile-Blight.
That's definitely true.
And
he may want the card that Matt takes right here.
Right, and Jake's got the life total here to work with, which is why the Hero's Downfall and the Fleecemane line early on in the game is so valuable. He can afford to take a hit from Den Protector, just leaving himself with maximum flexibility.
Well, how much do you think Jake might be contemplating a race of his own? If he has that Sorin in hand, unmorphing Den Protector, plussing Sorin, attacking, will put Jake far ahead in the life totals.
I'm not trying to really get into a race if I'm in Jake's position. I'm sort of following Matt's lead. If Matt lets me trade resources, I'm doing it. If Matt is not forcing me to trade resources, I'm going to generate some 2-for-1s.
All right, well, Sorin was the card taken, and now we'll see what Jake wants to get back. He flips up a Den Protector. Can grab that Sorin back. He could get a removal spell for the Den Protector. At the same time, he could always go with Siege Rhino.
Yep, I mean, this is kind of an attractive spot here for Siege Rhino.
Yeah, had he blocked, I think Siege Rhino would definitely be the play here.
Yeah.
This is a lot closer now that there's a Den Protector on both sides. Yeah. I mean, Bile-Blight looks really bad as a result.
Yes.
looks like he's going to go for Hero's Downfall. A lot of interchangeable parts. Downfall is always going to be good for a trade.
Yeah, and maybe the problem here with getting a Siege Rhino is Matt's shown Glare of Heresy. So Jake may want to try to develop his board with as many non-white cards as possible.
Yeah, the only way that I think the Downfall line doesn't work out is Matt's play next turn is 6th land and hanger back on 3. Then I think Jake gets punished for getting back the Downfall. As a result, it looks like Jake is content to race. Rather than leaving back his Dam Protector to block, he'll go ahead and attack it into Costa.
And even with Hangerback, if Hangerback Walker is still a concern, Jake has the ability to downfall, untap Tragic Arrogance.
Right, it's not clean, but
he's got it covered. The worst case scenario, he still has covered. And is Costa really passing with 4 mana up and a Hangerback Walker in his hand?
That'd be very aggressive.
It would have to come off the top with a 6th land untapped. It's pretty unlikely.
See here, Matt goes into the tank for a long time. Finally decides to take damage. He drops to 7. In play now, it looks like it will be the Nissa for Jake. And if the line here was to race, I somewhat expected to, I guess once again, to see Siege Rhino. But it's very hard to go wrong. These cards are all so interchangeable.
Yeah, and I think because of Glare of Heresy being in Matt's deck, better, if it's close, get the thing that isn't a white permanent.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a clean answer to Siege Rhino and Glare. There aren't really any clean answers to Hero's Downfall.
Exactly. It's close. I think in the abstract Downfall versus Siege Rhino in that spot is very close. But I think as much as possible, Jake wants to strand Matt with cards in his hand that he can't use. So if it's close, get the spell, not the white creature.
Yeah, the only other way that the Obs on aggro deck can blank a Hero's Downfall is something like Fleece Mane Lion with 7 mana is a way to blank it. And, you know, Matt's far off any of those sorts of plays.
Right. Hero's Downfall is just very safe.
I guess, and even perhaps there's a chance if you get back Rhino, maybe Matt's playing a copy of Elspeth. Certainly Hero's Downfall is better on that board.
Right.
And it'll be Obs on Charm from Matt.
The ceiling on Siege Rhino is certainly higher, but the floor is a lot lower.
Yeah. He'll draw 2, untap. He's at 4 to Jake's 14. Here's Dem Protector. Yeah, Jake not going to let Costa attack. He's going to go downfall it. And suddenly, Jake has once again taken on that aggressive role.
Yeah, and the reason you saw Jake stop him there, threat a Wingmate Rock.
Yep. So Rhino put Matt up to 7 and Jake down to 11. But Costa, I like how fluid he's been with his role here. You know, going from the aggressive deck to suddenly he's the one drawing 2 Obs on Charm and playing Siege Rhinos. That's, you know, they're playing each other's game right now.
Yep.
But Jake has land 7. He'll go ahead and flip the Nissa.
Another thing I can appreciate here from Costa, it seems like as much as possible he's trying to leave himself with 1 creature in play, and that's to take a lot of the sting out of the Tragic Arrogance that's in Jake's hand.
Yeah.
So now Matt's in this weird spot where blocking and trading is actually kind of weirdly good for him because he doesn't want Tragic Arrogance to wipe his entire board if he can avoid it.
Yeah, it looks like Nissa will make a 4/4. But at least in their hands, it looks like Matt's board is close to being equal to Jake's.
Yeah. Jake's hand is very good.
Yeah.
Matt's doing some good work here to make sure that Tragic Arrogance isn't too bad for him, but the Siege Rhino is definitely going to be solid.
Okay, actually, rather than making the 4/4, we'll back up and see just exactly what Nissa's doing here. Yeah, it looks like she'll actually use the plus ability to draw Jake a card. It'll put a copy of Urborg into play. And then here will be the Rhino to go ahead and accompany.
And Jake is playing face up from Matt's perspective. He knows about the Tragic Arrogance.
Yeah.
Matt's working with perfect information.
Can Matt steal the control role away from Jake? He has a copy of Herald of Torment in hand, along with Obs on Charm, and it looks like Fleece Mane Lion. So first play will be the Siege Rhino will come attacking at Nissa. And remember, if Jake tries to gang block here, Matt does have a copy of Obs on Charm in his own hand.
And if Jake just goes Rhino in front of Rhino, well, because of the way the trample damage works, Matt can go ahead, take care of the Rhino, and all the trample damage will come over.
Yep, and then go ahead and get the Nissa. And, you know, I don't want to speak too soon, but this game looks like it's going well for Matt all of a sudden.
This is a fine spot. The major issue for Matt right now, and I disregarded this as a possibility earlier, is the life total. He's at 4. He's facing a Den Protector. He might get squeezed out of this game.
Huge play, and that's exactly what you said. Rhino blocked Rhino, and Obzon Charm was there, took care of the blocker. The Rhino takes care of the Planeswalker, and with Fleece's Line back to block, it's Jake playing off the top of the deck now. He could put Matt, this will do it. This top deck gets it. He puts counters on the Den Protector. Tragic Arrogance can remove Fleece's Line as a blocker. That will be lethal here. And Matt had to dodge that one draw, and he cannot do it.
I mean, a great game there from Matt. Knew what he had to do, but his back was against the wall in terms of life total, and there were definitely too many things he had to try to cover himself against. He had to beat the board, he had to beat Tragic Arrogance, and he needed to do it at 4 life, and it was just too much to do.
Yeah, so congratulations to Jake Mondello. He'll end at 7-1 with Obzon control, defeating Matt Costa and handing him his first loss of the day.
Yeah, a really, really well-played game by both players there. Really well-played match. You can see the edge that the Obzon control deck has in the matchup, and game 1, the one that Costa was able to get, it was just a consequence of getting off to a fast start there before Jake could do anything.